On the 13th of May, 1971, a flight landed at Zurich Airport. On board was a woman in a wig and dark glasses. She quickly made her way to the offices of the Swiss Credit Bank in Bahnhofstrasse. There she opened an account under the name of Helga Rosenkrantz Hughes. Swiss banks are world famous for discretion. There seemed no reason to query her Swiss passport and identity card and her modest deposit of 1,000 Swiss francs. Over the next 7 months, the account fluctuated, as large American checks were paid in and the lady withdrew equally large sums of cash. By early December, Helga Rosenkrantz Hughes had withdrawn all the money in the account, in cash, leaving the bank holding photostats of the McGraw-Hill checks, countersigned on the back, H.R. Hughes. The signatures matched the one she signed on her original bank account signature card. On the 7th of December, McGraw-Hill announced the book, and almost immediately Howard Robert Hughes denied any part in it. On the 7th of January, he gave his first press conference in 14 years, by telephone from Nassau to an audience of 7 selected journalists in a conference room at the Sheraton Universal Hotel in Los Angeles. They sat fascinated as his voice emerged from the loudspeaker on a table in front of them.
I've never read it, I don't know what's in it, but I mean, this episode is just so fantastic that it taxes your imagination to believe that a thing like this could happen.
I take it, sir, you do not know a man named Clifford Irving, then?
No, I never saw him. I never even heard of him until a matter of days ago when this thing first came to my attention.
Do you think that it's possible that there's been a man going around representing himself as Howard Hughes and has duped this author?
Has duped the author?
Yeah, into thinking he was talking to Howard Hughes.
No, that doesn't seem possible to me. I mean, it seems to me the author has ample motivation for doing this thing without being duped.
I understand he got paid $300,000 advance for the book.
That's what I've been told, and that's what we're trying to run down, because that's the one thing that I don't understand here. In other words, there's got to be a bank record somewhere of this transaction. It is so fantastic and so utterly beyond the bounds of anyone's imagination that I simply haven't any idea what is it. Well, obviously, the motive for Irving could be money, but behind this thing.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hughes also signed 2 affidavits rejecting the book's authenticity. All 7 of the questioners had met him in the past, and all agreed that it was his genuine voice. A recording was rushed to a laboratory, and Dr. Lawrence Kerster compared it with Hughes' voice at a Senate subcommittee hearing in Washington.
From the result of our analysis this afternoon, it would be my opinion that it indeed was Howard Hughes' voice.
But Irving and his publishers still insisted theirs was the genuine article. Returning to the United States with his wife Edith and their son, he asked reporters if McGraw-Hill and Time Life would conceivably have parted with such massive sums unless they were certain they were buying the real thing. Publisher Harold McGraw unconditionally backed Irving at a press conference and produced his company's checks with apparently genuine endorsements. To him, the evidence seemed irrefutable.
And so forth, personally handwritten letters, personally signed, contracts, endorsed checks, which you've just seen, and then the manuscript itself, edited in his handwriting on a good many of the pages.
Handwriting experts backed him up.
Yes, this also is a genuine signature of Howard Hughes, in my opinion. And incidentally, so far as I know, Clifford Irving was not in Las Vegas at the time this will turned up, so that eliminates one possibility for it not being authentic.
But by the end of January 1972, serious doubts were creeping in, and Irving emerged from New York's Chelsea Hotel to confront skeptical reporters who were asking if it were true that the Swiss credit bank had called in the police and that McGraw-Hill had suspended publication of the book. Events were now speeding up, and on the 31st of January, 2 grand juries were called to see if there was fraud. The Irvings were called to testify. Then, on the 10th of February, McGraw-Hill admitted they had been fooled. It was a hoax. Separately, Edith was accused by the Swiss police of passing herself off as Helga R. Hughes. Now it emerged that when Irving had said he was with Howard Hughes, he had really been off with other women. One of them was scuba instructress Anne Baxter, who did little to back up his story. The other was singer and Danish countess Nina van Pallant, of Nina and Frederick fame, whose evidence was damning.
Tell us, did you talk to the grand jury about your visit to Mexico with Clifford Irving, and did you confirm to them what you said in Europe, which was that he never saw Howard Hughes?
Not in my presence, no.
He didn't see Howard Hughes in your presence, and he lied when he said he saw him when you were visiting Mexico.
You can't say he lied. She's on the
I don't know.
Huh? Could you tell how your testimony Could you tell how your testimony...
Worse was to come, as the source of Irving's basic information was revealed as Stanley Mayer, a Hollywood wheeler-dealer. He had supplied a draft of Noah Dietrich's memoirs about his years with Hughes to Irving. With the Dietrich diaries to work on, Irving and his friend Richard Susskind had got the inside information they needed to produce an authentic-looking manuscript which bamboozled McGraw-Hill. Charges were immediately filed, and these were spelled out in detail by Assistant District Attorney Robert Morvillo.
Investigation conducted by the Office of the District Attorney for the County of New York and the Office of the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Indictments were filed in both the state courts and in the federal court today, charging Mr. and Mrs. Clifford Irving and Mr. David Susskind, Mr. Richard Susskind, with crimes in connection with the so-called authorized autobiography of Howard Hughes.
Reporters listened intently as the prosecutors spelt out where Irving had got the model for his forgeries of Howard Hughes' writing.
After seeing the Dear Chester bill letter in its entirety in Life magazine, he realized that his first effort in simulating the writing of Mr. Hughes was faulty, and that on subsequent occasions he redid.
Having explained the sources of the hoax, the prosecutors were able to detail the precise method the two men had used to give the manuscript such apparent authenticity.
Well, the indictment covers that and simply states that that's what happened, that in July and August on the Isle of Ibiza, the book was written in tape-recorded sessions between Mr. Irving and Mr. Susskind, and that, as I stated before, what would happen is that on one day, Mr. Irving would pretend that he was Mr. Howard Hughes, and Mr. Susskind would ask him certain questions based upon their research. And on the next day, Mr. Susskind would pretend that he was Mr. Howard Hughes, and Mr. Irving would ask him questions based upon their research. And then those tape recordings were transcribed. Because the book that was eventually given to McGraw-Hill was a transcription, or a purported transcription, of conversations between Clifford Irving and Howard Hughes.
The hoax had gained worldwide publicity, but reporters were anxious to know whether financially it really had been such a big fraud.
How about Mr. Morvillo on that one?
Well, because there is an indictment still pending and there hasn't been any plea, I can't give you too broad an answer with regard to that, but I can say that in our securities fraud unit on a daily basis, we get crimes of a much greater magnitude in the area of security swindles, market manipulations, and things like that. I think this particular case just has a combination of factors which makes it irresistible to follow.
The game was up, and on the 6th of March, the Irvings confessed that the autobiography of Howard Hughes had been a fraud. They also revealed the way in which they had been able to cash the checks which McGraw-Hill thought were going to Howard Hughes. It was indeed Edith Irving who had gone to Zurich to open the false bank account at the Swiss Credit Bank. She had stolen the identity card of her first husband's wife, Helena Rosenkrantz, to justify the initials. Once the account was in place with an apparently authentic signature, she had no trouble paying in and withdrawing large sums. The man whom Irving had gambled would never expose him never did write his autobiography. But the exploits of Howard Hughes were so extraordinary, they did not need one to live on.
The secret society became notorious for its savage methods and white-hooded costume. The second in today's Great Crimes and Trials double reviews the Ku Klux Klan killings. That's next.